Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email us, Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase pricing and availability questions regarding this watch. Today we're discussing a 2021 launch from Moser Cie of Schaffhaus in Switzerland. This is the Heritage Dual Time, and it's part of the rarely seen Heritage collection. On paper, this looks a lot like a pilot's watch, but the official line from Moser has always been that the Heritage is an example of a sporting field and utility watch made by the original, that is pre-2005 Moser company. So, well, it looks like a pilot's piece, and by the standards of many brands, it would be that. Officially, it is an homage to the heritage of sporting watches at Moser. So, in steel, 42 millimeters in diameter. You can see the timepiece in profile, 11.9 millimeters thick from lug to lug, 46.4 millimeters, with a 22 millimeter spacing between the lugs. We're going to throw this watch on my wrist, and it's very comfortable. I've always found that the Heritage watches fit best. A big reason for that is that they're almost like wire lug radiomir, where you just look at the edge of the case, and that's really your visual reference, not the edge of the lugs, because the lugs are barely there. So I would recommend this watch for a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference, and it's thinner than you think, so it will fit underneath the sleeve. My wrist is 16, and you can see the watch. We'll zoom out a little bit, get it in context of my hand and my arm. It's a really nice fit. We have Moser's well-known kudu leather straps. They're sort of rustic, minimally tanned. They've got a nice distressed grain to them. This one's in gray. You can see we've got a fairly thick cut. We've got a sheer cut side with gray lacquer for refinement. Gray calfskin on the bottom. Brand new Moser strap, no crimping, no gouging. And then a Moser buckle with a combination of satin finish and polish and Moser branding. Speaking of branding, Moser has decided that the company's design language is strong enough that the logo can be ghosted in clear lacquer on the dial, and I agree with them. That said, this particular style is perhaps one of their less seen models. So if you think the sports watches like the Streamliner and the Pioneer are a little bit overexposed and you don't want the average Endeavor, this might be the hookup because this gives you a lot of Moser character. The dial is what they call the Fume, so it is a burgundy metallic sunburst brushed metallic grain radiating out from the center, and then they use a lacquer fade to almost dark, I would say almost black cherry or actual black at the edge. Now, an interesting feature here is, though it looks like a vintage field watch or pilot's watch, take note, these numerals are solid blocks of chromolite ceramic lume. So they have three dimensions. They have length, width, and height, which leads to an appealing lume shot and a three-dimensional quality to these numerals when you view the watch in the dark. Absolutely no shortage of lume there. That's what they call dusk till dawn lume. No need to recharge at 2 a.m. All right, the rest of the dial, you can see there's a chemin de fer, or a railroad track outboard, and they really did do a pretty good job here of keeping most of the numerals symmetrical. So you could see, for example, this 9, well, it's not that 9, unfortunately, but that 4 and that 5 go elsewhere on the dial. You can see that 4 and that 5, or that 4 and that 5. The disc for the date is really the only compromise, where the numeral doesn't match what's on the dial. There's also another weird feature of this watch, which makes it different from every other travel time watch I've encountered. So we do have superimposed primary and secondary hour hands. Here's the weird part. On every other travel time watch, think Rolex, GMT Master, a million others, you move the local hour hand, which is the one on the top, not the bottom. And that local hour hand is the one that drives the date. This watch has a reference hour that drives the date. So the time where you are not is actually the date that's displayed. So instead of representing the date where you are, it represents the date where you aren't. And the idea here is that if you're trying to keep track of far-flung associates, either friends or business partners, you're going to know what day it is where they are, not merely what time it is where they are. So that is a very strange feature, and it makes the watch almost unique in that regard. There's also a hacking seconds function, so if you want to stop it and set it to a reference time, you can do so. Chemin de fer, or railroad track outboard, for reading individual seconds and minutes. And you can see there's a slightly rolled profile to the seconds hand as well as the minute hand at the end to prevent parallax distortion. and then we turn it all over. You can see in profile, Moser cases usually feature scalloped edges or coined edges. Here we have coined profiles that are almost completely flush. So Moser cases always have that distinctive side profiling. Everything else, though, is polished. Moser logo on the crown, different than the Moser crowns you see on other models. We have an HMC 809 movement on the back. So this is what they call a HMC 200 with a dual time function. So it's a nicely sized movement. It's got a tungsten rotor, double directional, magic lever style winding system with ceramic ball bearings for greater efficiency, 3 Hz beat rate, 72-hour power reserve, dual time with hacking seconds, Moser making the escapement, the hairspring, and the balance in-house, which is deeply impressive because very few companies are able to do that. Even most movement manufacturers aren't able to do that. You could see it is a free-sprung balance for shock resistance with all of the fine adjustments done using these 2 pairs of variable inertia screws. So not only more shock resistant, it also allows for finer timing adjustments. And then you have a dual-anchored balance bridge anchored on each side of the balance for better shock tolerance. 30 meters water resistant, so don't take it swimming, but in every other regard, it is a pretty sporting watch. You can see there's snailing on the edge of the bridges, media blast on the base plate, all screw heads are polished. We have satination on the crown wheel and the crown wheel core. We have these double-crested Moser stripes. And then we have a mechanically applied, but neatly applied and handsome bevel. If you love this watch, reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.